Hello friends, this is GM Danielson, coming to you through the phantom microphone to tell you about a very special project of which I have been part. In March 2018, I was approached by author Jake Try to narrate the sequel to his popular children's horror book, Nightmare Soup. After reading the sample stories, I was more than happy to lend my voice to the project, and in the coming weeks recorded the entire audiobook companion to the book. Written by Jake Try and illustrated by Andy Ciasco, Nightmare Soup 2 is an even more deranged journey into the horrors of childhood. From devastating visits to the dentist to vengeful animals that hang from Grandpa's trophy wall, the stories are the perfect blend of urban legend and creepypasta to delightfully scare your tyke. And I must say, the stories certainly entertained me as well. Far from boring Grimian fairy tales. Visit www.nightmaresoup.com today and pick up your Volume 2 copy of book and audiobook. Scare a young person, or scare yourself too. Don't say I didn't warn you.
The Hunting Trophy. Carly hated going to her grandparents' house, which was extremely odd for a 12-year-old. It wasn't because she disliked them, or because they treated her badly. She loved them. It was because her grandpa was an avid hunter, and he loved to display his trophies all over the house. Deer, wild boars, birds, badgers, bobcats. If an animal lived in the Midwest, there was a good chance one of its kind was stuffed and displayed at old Grandpa Pete's house. There was one trophy that Carly particularly hated. It was the head of a large buck. The biggest deer you can ever imagine, according to Grandpa Pete. It was mounted right above the fireplace in the family room and impossible to miss. Something about it just made Carly's skin crawl. It looked angry that its life had been cut short just to become some old man's wall decoration. And then there was that time about 3 years ago when Carly was sleeping over. She got up in the middle of the night for a glass of water, and as she passed the family room, a chill ran up her spine. Goosebumps exploded all over her body, and her stomach twisted into a tight knot. It was the exact feeling you get when you know someone, or something, is watching you. She slowly turned her head towards the fireplace and looked up, and the deer head moved. At least, that's what she swore up and down to her parents and grandparents, who only laughed. But Carly was convinced she really did see that thing move, and ever since that night, she hated visiting that house. She wasn't too happy when her parents told her they were leaving for a weekend trip, and she would be staying with her grandma and grandpa. "Dad, no! Please! Is there anyone else I can stay with?" Her dad simply folded his arms in disapproval. "Carly, come on now. You know this fear of yours is a bit ridiculous. Yes, I admit those hunting trophies can be a bit creepy, but you haven't seen your grandparents in months. You're 12 years old. You can suck it up for a weekend." And just like that, it was settled. When Carly and her parents walked through the door, a smell of freshly baked brownies flowed through the air like a delicious haze. It was that type of pleasant aroma that only comes from Grandma's house. And something even more amazing. All the stuffed dead animal trophies were gone, nowhere to be found. In fact, the whole house had been redone. "Well, hello, dear." Carly's grandma and grandpa rushed to greet them, and swooped Carly up into a big hug. "You've gotten so big. It seems like forever since I saw you last." "It's only been like 4 months, Grandma." "Well, that is forever for a grandparent." Carly looked around again, wondering if this was too good to be true. "So where are the animals?" Grandpa Pete chuckled to himself. "Well, I built a space for all those critters down in the basement, and that's where they'll stay from now on. Your grandma said it was time, and we knew you didn't like coming here because of it. So down they went." Carly gave her grandpa another big hug. "Well, come on into the kitchen and eat up some of these brownies your grandma made." Carly was smiling from ear to ear as her grandpa grabbed her bags and they started walking through the house. But that smile was short-lived as they walked past the family room. Grandpa Pete had moved all the animal trophies except one, the deer head above the fireplace, and it looked angrier than ever. "Hope you don't mind I kept old Gus up there. Your grandma said I could keep one up there, and he's my pride and joy. So he got to keep his spot above the fireplace." Carly's stomach was queasy at the sight of it, but she forced a smile as best she could. It's okay, Grandpa. I don't mind it as much as I used to." But she did mind it, very much so. She just told herself she would do her best not to go into the family room. It was a big house, and there were plenty of other areas to hang out. Later that night, Carly was reading a book on the front porch when her grandma called her in. "Carly, come look at this." "Be right there, Grandma." She found her grandparents sitting in the family room, looking at an old photo album. Carly slowly approached, her eyes locked onto the deer head above the fireplace. "Look at your mom back when she was in college. You're going to be the spitting image of her. I can already see it." Carly took her gaze off the deer head and looked down. She really did look like her mom, but that realization was soon replaced by another one. In the photo, her mom was standing in the living room, and right behind her was the deer head. Carly moved closer to get a better look. Its face, its eyes, its mouth, they were different. The hair on the back of Carly's neck stood up as she backed away. "What is it, honey?" Her grandma's eyebrows were raised in concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "The deer, its face, it's different in that picture. How can that be?" "Oh, Carly, not that stuffed deer again. I thought you were over that." Grandpa Pete stood up and walked towards the fireplace. "You hear that, Gus? Carly is still afraid of you after all these years. Can you believe that?" Grandpa Pete chuckled to himself and reached up to jokingly pat the side of the deer's neck. But as he looked towards his wife, he immediately noticed something was wrong. She had the same petrified expression as her granddaughter. The color had run out of her face, her lips were trembling, and her eyes were frozen in absolute horror. Then Pete felt a burst of warm air on his hand, like something was breathing on it. He slowly turned his head, forcing himself to look at what he knew would be an impossible sight. The deer head had moved. It was breathing, and its cold black eyes were staring right at him, shaking with anger. It had been waiting for years for old Pete to get this close. Its quivering lips peeled back, revealing a set of jagged, misshapen teeth. It then opened its mouth wider than any normal animal could, its jaw cracking and snapping. It let out a sickening scream that shook the room, and then it bit down on Pete's hand, ripping the flesh from the bone. Grandpa Pete fell to the floor, screaming in agony as blood gushed all over the carpet. Carly was frozen in terror, completely unable to move. She could only sit there and tremble violently. The deer head started to shake back and forth, continuing to scream in a horrific, ear-piercing tone that was gut-wrenching and unnatural. Then the bolts and screws that held it in place started to come out of the wall. "Get my shotgun!" Grandpa Pete yelled. But before Carly or her grandma could react, the deer head screamed once more, so loudly the windows shook. It then ripped itself from the wall and tumbled down, antlers first, into Grandpa Pete, goring him through the stomach. Grandpa Pete was lying motionless on the floor as a pool of blood collected around him. Then the deer head stopped moving, its deep black eyes now dull and lifeless, its rabid expression of anger wiped away. Whatever spirit that had resided there was now gone, and its revenge was finally complete.